This is the very best time of my life. I'm financially independent. My time is my own. I have found work that I really love and that I'm good at. I don't anymore have to try to do the things that I'm not very good at. I don't have to be omnicompetent. That's a great release. My own midlife happened to be an unexpectedly difficult passage. I hit 50 at a point where I would have said, serenely married. Certainly wasn't a perfect marriage, but I thought it no more imperfect than other people's. My children were more or less grown up. I had an established career as a writer. I lived in a house that I enjoyed. As I would say now, perhaps by good luck, there was a trigger incident, and I suddenly realized I wasn't going to be married anymore. And that began my midlife. There was an initial period of shock and dismay and grief and mourning and all the things you go through if you are breaking up a 30-year relationship with someone you have very much loved. But I came out of it feeling that I had emerged from a cocoon and that for the first time in my life, I wasn't living for anybody else. I wasn't pleasing my parents or my husband. I wasn't looking after my children or my dog, barely my plants. I was just leading my life.
I think it was a few years ago that I became very acutely conscious of the fact that youth had gone. I retained my youth a lot longer than most people do. I guess I'd gone into my 40s and still looked young. But around 45, 46, there was, a massive amount of graying hair. I mean, it's all gray in here. And the wrinkles were starting to show. And in the last year and a half or 2 years, I've started to get the wrinkles in my neck. So I started to feel the kind of aging that I couldn't escape anymore. But what I was doing was I would go into the subway, wander down the street, and look at the women who I thought were approximately my age to see what they looked like to me. I think what I was doing was I was making a list in my own mind and ticking off the list. Is this who I am? Is this who I am? Is this who I am? That continual search for identity. But now I don't seem as obsessed as I was then. I think that that certain transition has happened. It's over. And there are other things that thankfully concern me now because it's uncomfortable to be that self-obsessed. It's quite adolescent.
Oh, I'm better looking now. I was no beauty as a young girl. I always felt awkward. I had an image of myself as fat. Though when I look at photographs of myself in my teens, I was quite a slender girl. But people always said to me, "You're just like my mother," and my mother was heavy. My mother did not prepare me for a life in which I would go it alone, without a man, because the assumption in our household, as in most households of that era, was that whatever you did in your teens and early 20s, you were doing until you got married. Marriage was the goal. And you might sort of, fiddle with things after you got married. But the big thing was that now you were somebody's wife and somebody's mother. I was not prepared for a vision of myself as responsible for me totally. And then my marriage fell apart. And in terms of my own worldview, I had now made the worst mistake anybody could make. I had failed at my marriage. But that was very releasing. It's like the first dent in a new car. You know, you can park anywhere now, and it doesn't matter if you get banged up on the sides. I don't think of myself as being premenopausal, menopausal, or postmenopausal. The menopause has been a very minor event in my life. I'll tell you, in fact, the story of my menopause. In my imagination, it happened the day that I was brushing my teeth and a cap flew off and down the sink, a $350 cap. I fished and it went farther. I called the plumber and he said, "I'm going to have to take apart the pipes." So he knelt down under the sink and began to throw out all the untidy stuff that I had stored under the sink. And he threw out a box of Tampax. And when it came flying out, I thought, when did I last reach for that? I must have gone through the menopause. I felt in the first place, because I'm a child of the Depression, what a nice economy. I'm saving, about several dollars worth of pads and tampons per month. It's certainly more convenient never to have to think about it. And I think for any woman, it is a marvelous liberation not to have to think about birth control.
I haven't menopaused, so I don't know. I'm looking forward to it as a treat. But I have done a couple pregnancies. I have lactated. I menstruate real well all the time. And I can't believe this is dysfunction. And for it to be treated as a dysfunction, as a sickness, is infuriating. All of these are wonderful processes. We all got here because our mothers did these things. It's the one miracle that we all get to experience is the female reproductive capability. And to treat it like a sickness, like a dysfunction, like a limitation or a liability, or don't pick that up, your womb will fall down, all of these things that you hear all the time, it's just so annoying. It's so outrageous. It's a complete perversion of what our bodies are really about. Because our bodies are terrific. We can do all these things. We can be so strong, so healthy, and we can make babies. I mean, you have to live in your body. It's not me against my body anymore. It's sort of me and my body. We are one piece. I found it was really a pest to be a shapely and attractive young woman. It was like somebody, anybody, everybody was going to devour you, you know? It was something that I certainly used all the time that I was a young woman. I was a perfectly good cupcake, cuter than cute, and real roughly. And I wore a bouffant hairdo and all of that stuff, and had a wardrobe of polka dots. It's nice that it's over, and most people don't hit on me most of the time. And especially when I look like this, almost nobody hits on me. My dad was a builder, and he had me as slave labor from the time I was about 8 until I finally escaped when I was around 17, and promptly married my husband, who had me as slave labor for another 10 years. And in all those years, these men who were both building things, and I was the gopher and the get the wrench and the buy the this, and had me, doing their step and fetch it. Nobody ever thought I should do it myself. Neither of them ever suggested I should run a power tool. So I was around it for 20 years, if you count from when I was 8 until I was 28 when I got divorced. I almost immediately bought a house and started rebuilding it, room by room. A great big old house. It was my house. I was my own person, and I just decided I was going to do it all. Most of it I knew how. The parts I didn't know, I would hire someone once, like I hired one plumber one time, watched him plumb, and then I knew how to plumb, right? This stuff is not magic. It's really fairly simple. I had hired 2 men, one last spring and one this fall, and neither one of them would do what I told them to do. So I phoned this woman, carpenter, and she had the name of someone who wanted to be a carpenter's apprentice, and that's how I found Jan. The women who would go into trades should be the women who otherwise would learn how to run a switchboard. We are not going to need switchboard operators anymore. Machines can do that better. People will always live in houses, and everything that has to do with a house has to be maintained. And women can do all of this stuff and should be doing it.
I decided to go back after many years to school, and I took a 3-year program in hotel and restaurant management, where I picked up skills that I didn't have.
The first one you had was better. Yeah.
I had to get into a kitchen and cook. I didn't know the restaurants, but looked around and found a good kitchen. And they advertised for a position, and I went, and I was scared. And I felt old when I went into this kitchen because these people looked like 19 at the eldest in the kitchen. I thought, they won't hire me, but I thought, this is a good chance and I'll try. Well, they did hire me, and I asked them why, and they said it was because no one else applied, which made me feel wonderful. I've been told that I couldn't lift stock pots. You know, women aren't strong enough. And I said, well, let me show you. And, you know, you go ahead and do that. And we're expected to lift children in our homes and lift furniture, and but ordinary heavy stock pots.
What sort of restaurant do you want to open?
Well, we want to be downtown. We want to be a very reasonably priced restaurant. We want to service people who, like ourselves, were in with children or whatever and aching for a night out. It's also going to be a release for my husband, who has been there for us, our 3 grown children, and he's had 2 career changes, but he's looking forward to a 3rd, and he wants to do something else too, and he can't until I get established. Now it's his turn. After I can get established, then he'll do something else with his life too.
30 quart probably is best for the suit that we want.
Yeah.
When you hear the word menopause, what kinds of ideas or images come to mind?
When I think of menopausal women, I think of Edith Bunker.
Can you think of any more attractive, more sexy person than Edith Bunker? I don't really understand why I got depressed. It certainly wasn't related to empty nest. So it made me feel that emptiness might just be coincidental with depression for some women. But it was a terrible kind of feeling. I made scenes in front of the children telling them that they didn't need me anymore and that I was no good to anyone anymore. I indulged in enormous bouts of self-pity. Just felt so sorry for myself. It was like a black cloud that was waiting for me when I woke up in the morning. I slept all the time, was always tired. I didn't stop eating. I wish in a way depression caused me to stop eating, but in fact depression causes me to eat more. And it's still around now and then. I still wake up on some days, and now what I fixate on is, of course, the newsletter, that I should never have started it, that I'm making a mess of it, that it will never work, that I'm trying to do something I'm incapable of doing, and that I'm a charlatan, and that people will find me out. And I feel that way all day long and keep it to myself most of the time. And then the next morning I'll wake up and feel much better. I started it, I think, as a substitute for meeting with all my friends and talking about what I was going through and what they were going through. And I thought a newsletter might help to clear the air and to give people a forum in which to express what they were going through.
Right, okay.
I had friends who were going through physical symptoms, problems in their marriage. And I think part of it also was the now or never syndrome. The response has been incredible. It really has. The mailman turned up one Friday afternoon with 2 sacks of mail. When we undid the sacks, we found 900 either requests for the introductory issue or letters. They say all sorts of things about what their doctors tell them, for instance. We got one just yesterday, I think, where a woman says, this is a woman who says she shakes constantly and is very depressed, has been crying every day since last June. And then at PS, she says, my doctor says it's just nerves. I just like being this way. I'm gutless. And women who are isolated, who live in the country and who have no one to talk to and don't know an awful lot about what's going on in their bodies. Another woman who had a stroke, had a hemorrhage in her eye, and had gallstones, but her doctor kept telling her there was no risk attached to estrogen.
In the first workshop I gave, a gynecologist came who said that there really wasn't a problem because the kind of cancer which is caused by taking ERT is highly curable. It's easily detectable in its early stages, and that it's probably a different type of cancer than from real cancer.
But implied in that is that menopause is a worse disease than cancer because they can cure cancer. So take.
He started by saying menopause, in my opinion, is a deficiency disease.
But also that women are being put on these things for long periods of time. That you know, the point
And
you made.
women become guinea pigs, in effect, for something
Especially
that has
for
not
something
been
like osteoporosis, where it is a long-term thing. It's for the rest of your life.
Yes, and that's what they're now pushing. Start them at 40. I heard that at the Congress. Start them on estrogen at 40 and let them take it for the rest of their life.
Yes.
And then these old women won't be cluttering up the nursing homes and costing us millions of dollars a year and keeping them alive. Now, David Rubin says, as the estrogen is shut off, a woman comes as close as she can to being a man. Increased facial hair, deepened voice, obesity, and the decline of the breasts and female genitalia all contribute to a masculine appearance. Coarsened features, enlargement of the clitoris, and gradual baldness complete the picture. Not being a man, but no longer functional women, these individuals live in a world of intersex. To many women, menopause marks the end of their useful life. Having outlived their ovaries, they may have outlived their usefulness as human beings. The remaining years may be just marking time until they follow their glands into oblivion.
Doesn't that just make us feel great?
All the fears that women have, they're all brought out in the ads. The pharmaceutical companies play up on that stuff so that the doctor, before you even get to him, has already got these kinds of images.
The thing that appalls me about this is that doctors will say that they're not influenced by this kind of propaganda. And when I was at that Congress, it was so obvious that that is the kind of menopausal woman that they have in mind. This complaining, neurotic, ugly, decrepit,
helpless,
dependent, passive, and we really must do something to help these little old ladies.
I tell everybody I know, not just the women in the workshops, that I feel very strongly that menopause is a natural process. It's a part of our life cycle, and one that in some societies is welcomed with joy even because of women's increased status and respect at this time. There aren't inherently medical problems that go with menopause. Menopause is the reverse of puberty, if you like, and it's a normal, natural stage, which most women would not have problems with if they hadn't been told that they were going to.
The traditional attitude of the establishment was that menopausal women were suffering from the empty nest and had empty lives and were really pains in the neck and needed a lot of Valium to keep them sedated. And there's more Valium prescribed for middle-aged women in North America than for any other group. And Valium in itself has a depressive effect. So it was a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I think that there are a lot of us now who know that that's not true. I think that there are a lot of us now who recognize that the menopausal period is not just one of involutional melancholia. It is one where a lot of changes happen in our lives. A lot of transitions occur. A lot of life crises occur. One woman came in last year and said to me, my father died 6 months ago. My mother's in the hospital with a stroke. My husband wants to leave me, and I had my first hot flash. Okay. I still see an enormous number of women really quite shattered because their lives are dangling on a string being held by some man. And for me to watch them go through this individual process of moving from being the dependent, helpless woman without any awareness of her own strengths or power or skills, and move away from that to a position where she can choose to have a relationship but isn't desperately dependent upon it, a position of autonomy and choice. Whenever I see a woman go through that, and I see it so often, it's like watching the whole sociological revolution of the last 30 years unfold in one person's life, and it's very exciting and very challenging. Yes, there's life after menopause.
What about your relationships with men at this time?
They can no longer blackmail us. They don't seem to have the power over us that they did before.
They don't have the power to hurt us in the same way. We're not depending on them. We're choosing to live with them.
Right.
But
we also enjoy our own company, ourselves and each other.
Mm.
We're not as terrified of being alone. I mean, to be alone was such a frightening
Alone used to
thing.
mean without a man.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't seem to scare us anymore. And it's interesting because another piece of it is that we've all been socialized to feel that there's something not quite right about an older woman being a sexual being, and men have been socialized to think that they have to have a younger woman as a sexual partner as they get older. So that's another piece of the separation, I think, that occurs between men and women at this point. You know, is that they may think they have to turn to a younger woman, and we say, well, that's okay. They wouldn't say that's okay, but we say, well, maybe that's not our role. You know, that's another part of ourselves
I'm
that we
not
have
ready
to
to say
explore.
that's okay. Tell you the truth, I'm really not ready to say that's okay. I really still see myself as a very sexual being, and I am not prepared to say, okay, I pass the torch to a new generation. Not me.
These are some of the myths that are associated with menopause. That you'll stop enjoying sex, that you'll go crazy. A lot of people consider menopause a time where people just flip out. It's not true that you'll gain 15 pounds and your hair will go gray. Although I gained 15 pounds and my hair did go gray, but I also quit smoking, which has a lot to do with it. It's not true that taking estrogen will make you sexy, something that you might hear about, and we'll talk a little bit about that you'll have to have a hysterectomy or that you'll start chasing men. Chasing men has got nothing to do with menopause. It's fun anytime. Menopause is a transitional period. It's something that you go into, one kind of person, and you come out of as a slightly different kind of person, just as adolescence is. You have a lot of upheaval, a lot of turmoil during adolescence, but it's a great learning period in your life. And I think menopause and midolescence are great learning periods for women. I love kids. That's one of the reasons I have so many.
It's better than doing an oral in front of 25 sisters.
I enjoy them now, I think, more than I've ever enjoyed them. I think they just get better and better.
Prejudiced again.
I was a girl, guys. I'm non-discriminating.
I don't know whether compared to the Waltons we'd be considered a close family or not. I know we all love each other very deep. I think the children enjoy being with each other and show it all. And that means an enormous amount to me.
No stairs, though.
My family's been enormously helpful in all sorts of ways. I think they're very proud of what I'm doing. Larry and Peter are my muscle men, so when I needed boxes of stuff taken to the post office, they do that. Sarah helps stuff envelopes. Julie works as my assistant, and Adam is my bookkeeper.
But if I have to think that I know what it means,
Jack does the proofreading.
in a way that I don't have to even think about it. Just
Jack and I are very fortunate in that we have a kind of closeness and intimacy and need for each other that has changed enormously since we were first married, but is still there. It's a very harsh thing to say, but there aren't going to be that many men around when I'm 70 years old. Out of every 100 women, only 12 will still be married at the age of 70. The others will be separated, widowed, divorced, or were already and still are single. I think that the kinds of friendships that women have in their 50s can make the difference between a comfortable old age and a lonely old age.
For a long time, I thought that's all there would be, is just the kids and home and doing all the right things that mothers are supposed to do. But then kids have a habit of growing up and leaving home, and suddenly you have the rest of your life. This picture was taken when I was 6. I was a flower girl for a friend of my mother's, and I remember thinking how great it was to be so grown up. I was allowed to go to the reception and dance with all the men. It was a fun time. A good part of my growing up years was involved with St. John Ambulance. This picture was on a trip that we had out of the city. I had a good time. My husband and I went our first date down to Old Sunnyside in one of those machines that you sat in and put a quarter in the slot and it took a picture. And then our wedding. I don't know what to say about my wedding, except I remember thinking this was the beginning of happiness for the rest of my life. This is where it was all going to begin. Pictures of my kids when they were little. The one was just beginning to walk, could just barely toddle. I loved my kids, but it was hard. I wouldn't call it the best time of my life, no. When you're home and you're alone, it becomes really frustrating. I used to find myself going through the cupboards looking for something to eat. I figured it was either that or drink, and it was better to eat than to drink. I guess I managed to put on a considerable amount of weight, which I'm still in the process. Oh, I'm not going to tell you how much. I'll tell you I've lost 120 pounds of it, and I haven't finished, so I will be losing more. I began walking, one of the greatest things in the world that I ever did. And I made a point of walking every day. And from that, I found that I then started thinking about what I was eating, and then the weight started coming up. You do get feeling very scared about going out and wondering if you can function anymore, or if there's a place for you to function. You become, I think, very afraid because your life is your kids and what you see on TV or whatever. And to talk to real live adults is a whole, almost a new experience. It's certainly a skill you have to learn all over again.
Hi, Miss.
I've done a variety of things, actually. I started off just working part-time as a cafeteria supervisor. Then I went into doing teacher aide work. And now I'm doing some community outreach work, and then I'm doing some special monitoring of certain students, particularly new students to the school, making sure that their adjustment is a good one.
72.
Oh, aren't you smart?
We don't work on the first no more.
There's a lot of things to do in this community, and so the only way you can really work it is to choose a priority. And my priority has always been working with anything that has to do with youth. So I'm on an advisory board for a youth employment service, and I'm a director for a youth group. I have a good feeling, I think, for this community. It sounds crazy, but you could certainly find the same feeling in Jane Finch as I found when I lived in a small town.
How are you? All righty.
Fine. The assumption is often made that if you're poor, that you're the poor people that have to be saved, and everybody's doing what they can for the poor. I think a lot of people get angry at the labeling. Poverty can bring crowded conditions, and often does. It also brings sometimes a camaraderie with other people because everyone is in the same basic situation, and you end up sometimes richer than the people who are rich.
Don't get funny, lady.
I'm having a good time right now. I'm enjoying this time of my life. I'm busy. I've met a lot of people. I have a lot of friends, and very supportive friends, and yeah, it's a good time. I met Annette shortly after I came down here. Just neighbors meeting and saying hello and gradually getting to know each other. We're good friends. When something's bugging Annette, she'll phone me, and if something's bugging me, I can phone her.
I'm divorced, yes. I was divorced recently after a long separation. I never think of remarriage. It just never enters my mind.
Does your husband help you with support?
No, he doesn't help with support at all. I think right now I'm just at the poverty line. It's not too bad if you make adjustments and well, actually, I don't have to make any adjustments because this is where I am and it's where I've been, so I'm quite used to my style of life. My kids are pretty well grown now. Hi, Maria.
Did I get any phone calls?
Any phone.
Okay, well, if you call...
I'm able to work and study and enjoy family life.
I'll see you later.
Okay. You don't have to be impoverished because you're below the poverty line. I go to university at night and I work a full-time job during the day.
Annette has done so much academically, and she gives me a different perspective often, or at least keeps me in balance with what's happening.
Irene gives me a place to focus what I'm learning academically. I was wondering why they don't have... You live for a long time not knowing why things are going the way they're going in your life. Now I'm 44 and I'm beginning to fit pieces together.
He is playing masculine. She is playing feminine. He is playing masculine because she is playing feminine. She is playing feminine because he is playing masculine. He is playing the kind of man that she thinks the kind of woman she is playing ought to admire. She is playing the kind of woman that he thinks the kind of man he is playing ought to admire.
My marks are great. I have a whole string of A's and B plus. I would like to take some part at some time in the writing of a working class history because I don't think that Canadian workers are portrayed well in textbooks. I think one good example of that is the fact that some textbooks say that Cornelius Van Horn was responsible for the building of the Canadian Railway and completely neglects to mention the thousands of workers who spent years of their life doing the actual building, and many of whom were killed or injured along the way.
What about menopause? Is that something that worries you?
Menopause doesn't worry me. I don't think I'm there yet. It's not something I think about.
I don't have to worry about that anymore. It's over and done and gone, and I had a good time while it was happening, so it's no big problem.
What do you mean you had a good time?
It was a great time. It was a year of my life that was just phenomenal. It was really great. I probably had to be one of the flakiest years of my life, but it was good. I mean, my friends were all wondering what had happened to me. And my moods ranged from, I don't know, crazy to better. I don't know. It was just, I was all over the place like a yo-yo. But it wasn't a negative experience.
How did your family react to all of this?
Oh, they just didn't know what to make of anything. I just basically have reached the point where I decided that I'm old enough to be able to say what's on my mind, and if they didn't like it, too bad. And I don't have to ask permission. I passed 21 a long time ago, and I'm old enough to do what I want. My baby's 21 now, and they're all doing well. They're great guys, and I'm real proud of them. I've got 5 of them. They're all boys. 3 of them have started families of their own. My grandchildren are something special. I have 3 right now, and a 4th one will be on the scene soon, and they're a special light in my life.
Come on. Hurry up.
Get in there.
No. Hurry
Help
up.
her, Irene.
Clap. Clap. Hooray.
Oh, the greatest source of pleasure, I would say, one of the greatest sources of pleasure in my life at this point is a 6-year-old granddaughter. Partly it is that I am better as a grandmother than as a mother. I've grown beyond that, and I can enjoy this perfect flower of a child who is alive and curious, physically beautiful, energetic, interested in everything, observing everything, funny, imaginative, affectionate. And one of my indulgences at this stage is just to keep sending plane tickets. Audrey, come. I have always loved women and always had women friends. I met Jane actually by a kind of professional accident. I decided I had better write for some Canadian publications. One was Homemakers. So I sent Jane a manuscript cold, and she phoned me. And I think we had lunch together. Then, by a happy accident, she moved in across the street from me.
Bye, darling. Have a good week. Bye-bye. Bye.
I started work very young, at 14. And the reason was because I came from a very poor family, and it was a choice of either going to high school or not going to high school. And the only way I could get there was by working my way through. After high school, I stayed at my first job, which was working at a newspaper office as a copy boy. And when I graduated from high school, the newspaper offered me the job, so I stayed. There wasn't any point in going on. I knew I wanted to be in the newspaper business, so I figured I might as well start. I've been in journalism, communications, newspapers, magazines, ever since, except for a short period of time when I got out of the workforce to raise my 2 children.
Up on it for me. Okay. Bye-bye.
I started as the editor of Homemakers magazine. About 4 years ago, I was made executive editor, and last year, I was made a vice president and editorial director. It's the longest I've ever been anywhere. It's the best job I've ever had and the most fun I've ever had working, which I suppose is why I got to where I am, because I think if you enjoy doing something, you do it well.
These are the ones that we were working on.
Well, I love the idea of talking to women at a time when I think some of the most exciting things are going on. In the early spring of 1985, a big survey done by an advertising company came out and proved that 80 to 85% of all Canadian women felt that feminism was now a part of their lives. It wasn't a book that made me a feminist. My first husband left, and I got the swift kick into feminism that really counts, that most people get. I mean, when you have to go out and support 2 children all by yourself, you suddenly really know what are the issues affecting women today, or, you know, at that time. So you're not sort of reading about it as in a women's study course and looking at it and seeing how it relates to you. You know somebody suddenly isn't there doing the things that they were before, and you have to learn how to do them yourself. And you get out there and you realize that you are handicapped, and it isn't as easy. And that's when you realize that what these women, what I used to refer to as they, became us. All I know is that I went out to pick the children up from school one day, and when I came back to the house, there was a for sale sign on the front lawn. And of course, a for sale sign on your front lawn is like handwriting on the wall. It says, okay, lady, you got to move, and now you've got to find a job, and that's how I got back in the business. My daughters are very important to me. Very, very good, close friends. They're the most important things that I can think of ever in my world today.
And your friends from the company. Absolutely. Thanks very much.
I've been married 3 times. My first husband left me, and in the second marriage, my second husband left me, but pattern changes. In my third marriage, I decided that I was in, well, I was in an untenable situation. And I finally got up the nerve to say, this is enough, and say, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I didn't. And I think that it was one of the best things I ever did in terms of having the feel that I was in control of my life. The sense of relief was just awe-inspiring. It was almost like a magic pill, and I feel stronger and in a weird sense, brave. And that's funny, you know, to be 50 and brave, you know. And it's a great feeling. It's great. I have so much optimism that even if nothing better ever happens than now, that won't be bad. But whatever I have with me is mine and from my own being and needing, and not somebody else's crap that I'm carting around, their problems which they can't solve, and which, frankly, at my age, I don't have the patience to solve anybody else's problems anymore. I've got 50 good years left, and I'm going to work on me. I don't think I'm finished with men at all. I hope they're not finished with me either.
Do you like men?
Always, always. I enjoy the company of men. I like the other side of being female that men bring out. And there is another side of being female that women bring out, as you know, that closeness and being able to talk and knowing that some things are just too screamingly funny for words. But if you ever tried to explain it to a man, they'd think you were nuts. Makers magazine would discuss the ethics of killing cows. And what would Chatelaine would shoot hamburgers in the 10 best kitchens in Canada. City woman would tell you what to wear while eating hamburger. And Claire would go out to lunch. That was wonderful. And I find it wherever I go, that women today are really talking to other women in ways that they've never discussed things before.
I suddenly became aware of what it was like to be getting older. I hadn't really thought about that, you know, consciously before. Yeah. I became aware of older women or middle-aged women on the street. And I had very mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, I didn't feel old. You know, I'd never thought of myself as old. And yet I was getting signals every now and then, gradually, from the culture that I was getting older. One moment that came home to me very clearly was I was attending a party. It was a 40th birthday party for a man. And, you know, at some point in the evening, the gag gift arrived, and it was a stripogram. And I don't know if you've ever seen a stripogram happen, but this young, lovely thing comes in and sort of mills about at the party, and then at the appropriate moment, the music strikes up, and she begins to disrobe, and everybody gathers around, and it's supposed to be a real hoot, and she just strips off her clothing to her bra and panties, and the birthday boy sits there beaming with his wife at his side. And I can remember watching this and watching the crowd, and everybody was enjoying it and thinking it was so funny, and all I kept feeling was his wife is being made the butt of a joke.
That's right.
That here is the 40-year-old male, and his wife is no longer able to, service him sexually. He needs to be renewed as a man, and the younger woman will do it. And I remember feeling the pain of that at that moment, because I identified with her. And I don't even know if she felt it. She was laughing along with everybody, and I don't know if it, the click happened.
You're right. We are still living on a planet where most of the messages that are beamed at us suggest that if you arrived here tomorrow from Mars and you watched television, that there was not one woman over 35 who didn't look like Joan Collins and what's the other one?
Awful.
And the rest of us all curled up and died and went away somewhere.
We're trying to give the world a new image of what 50 is. Gloria Steinem says, well, that's what 50 looks like. Jane Fonda's 50.
Not quite.
Oh, well. But I mean, is that fair? Is that fair to the woman who isn't going to look like Jane Fonda or Gloria Steinem? Are we saying, you've now got to look like you're 25?
All right, but I think if it's a question between having Gloria Steinem and Jane Fonda as role models, or Whistler's mother, I would take Jane Fonda and Gloria Steinem. I want to see that they're a very vibrant,
Did
young...
you think Whistler's mother was 50?
Well, she couldn't get up out of the rocket 2 weeks later.
The shoot's finished.
Keep going.
We wait for the first time it happens, and you might as well forget it.
One of the things that I've always found about these things is, you know how much I love flowers. I have a neighbor who's a painter, Helen Lucas, who just lives 2 blocks from here. What the flower is. I have to move way back, and then I can guess.
Painting is what holds me up. It's the thing which I leaned on when I was going through all my growing and all my, I don't want to use the word anguish, but I think growth is always reasonably painful. I had the studio in which to do the growing. The answers that I've always needed, I've worked out first here. No, there is black there, but it's way at the end where I don't even pick it up. So I think with my Mediterranean background, the legacy given women is by the time they're our age, they're usually in black. The good Greek woman is really the sexless Greek woman. Of course, you marry for one reason only, and that's as well as being protected and to have your bills paid, to have children. After you've had children, there's usually, well, she is no longer really of any use. She no longer reproduces. So she becomes a second-rate citizen. My mother used to talk about binding her breasts when they began to emerge. She was so embarrassed. Obviously, even though it was never spoken about, I took on that same feeling. Before I could see myself as a totally sensuous, sexual person, I had to do it with drawings. And I think that what each painting wants to say is, here am I. Here is woman, here is life, here is light, here is joy. And I don't want to sit there in black in mourning for my life. I'm married to a wonderful man. I met him, by the way, by not being passive and waiting for the night to come. I put an ad in the Globe and said, artist wants someone to live with and to love and to share Mozart with. And my God, this wonderful man who lived 3 blocks away answered my letter. So he's wonderful. The first thing he does when he comes in the door, and this was my top priority, he looks to see what I've done in the studio. And he knows that no matter what, my work must come first. There's always a new painting to do, always a new challenge. And these years are totally, totally mine. These are golden, golden years.
Making a house? House. Oh, that's nice. What about you, Tristan? You making a house? Yeah? Are you gonna start putting some in here? Look at all Julian has. Here you go. You're welcome. You're welcome. What did you make, Julian? Is that ever nice? People say to me, you've raised 5 children, and why are you looking after all these little children? And I just say because I enjoy doing it, and I like to do it. I love the children, so I might as well be doing what I like to do. That's why I do it. You're welcome. Here you go. Thank you. Drink your juice. I went to work once, and it didn't work out. It just wasn't what I wanted. I like being in a home rather than be out in an office. Was it good? I had my children all by the time I was 19, 5 of them. And now they've all gone from home. They're workers like their father. Bye. Bye.
Bye. See you later.
You have to bend
Bye.
down for him. He's not going.
We were married very young. I was 15 and my husband was 16.
Bye, Tristan. Bye.
If you've had children around you, most of your life, and all of a sudden they're gone, and it's like an empty feeling. By looking after these children, it really fills my life.
What happened? Did you have an accident?
41. Well, I'm now in the first stages of menopause, and at first it kind of scared me because I didn't know enough about it. And I talked to my doctor, and I think it's just all in the way you handle it yourself. Like, you don't have to go and hide in a corner and think that there's something wrong with you because you're going through this. You can deal with it day by day, and it makes it much easier. Oops, Julian, get up.
We live in uncertainty. We live in constant uncertainty. We don't know when we're going to die. Lots of children die, infants die, young people die in wars. And it seems to me, therefore, that aging must be one of the great privileges that we have. So that human beings who are aging ought to be filled with gratitude that they have been able to live long enough and avoid all those pitfalls of death thus far. Instead of that, we find ourselves aging and complaining a great deal that, in fact, it's going to end this little adventure that we have. I think that when one is young, one expects a certain kind of reward. You are rewarded by having attention because you are attractive, because you are sweet, because you are docile, you are loved, and because you comply, you make other people feel served in some sense. And that has its rewards. There is a kind of reward that goes to youth. That reward is gone. I am not seen as the innocent virgin. There is a reward for being that vision. There is a kind of exquisite tenderness that goes towards that vision of a person. The whole question of identity is an interesting one, and the identity of women is what we're focusing on. But in my universe, that's not the primary identity that I have, nor is my ethnic one, nor is my role as a writer. These are not, for me, primary identities. They were at some point. At one point, motherhood was the identity, the only single top priority identity. But none of them are, for me, the crucial question anymore. To me, the crucial question is the spiritual identity. I see aging as a time of great challenge for the person's spiritual flowering, a time of wisdom, a time of kindness, a time of generosity, a time of challenging oneself to be increasingly open rather than less open as we might be inclined to become.
Sometimes I get frightened when I think I've made a lot of changes in my life and I'm not quite sure where it's going to lead me and am I going to be able to handle it? And then I kind of think, well, you know, if times get really tough, I can just package everything in a paper bag and become a bag lady. I just, like, what else is there?
There are times when I wake up and I think, oh, it's all going to disappear. It's all going to disappear. But somehow or other, deep down, I have enough confidence to know that's not true. But you never, ever really get over that.
Well, do you want the good news or the good news?
I move between great periods of excitement to what am I doing? But at a gut level, I know that we're on the road and that the next part of my life is looking like it's going to be a real adventure, and that excites me. We've planned for so long and we've worked and slugged so hard for others, and we feel now it's time, if we're going to work this hard, we'll do it for ourselves, and yeah, it's really time to get going.
Oh, this is an extraordinary time of life. One of the great things about it, and this is true probably for anybody who's hit 50, is that I've made my catastrophic mistakes. I spent years and years dancing on a tightrope, umbrella held high. And it seems to me again and again now, I just jump without a parachute. And I always land on my feet and look around and like the territory.